Artificial intelligence firms are facing mounting criticism after News Corp Australia's Michael Miller warned that AI companies are stealing journalism, threatening the role of reporters in holding power to account, and calling for urgent government action to protect news media. For more, let's head to Sydney. We're joined by Darren Woolley from Trinity P3. Good to see you. Talk to us about the reasons that we have seen, I guess, the CEO of News Corp Australia come out with such a stark warning.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. Look, this is a situation where for a long time we had a rule called the copyright laws, and that if you created content that it was yours and you could then use that to commercialise it any way you liked. Basically the AI companies are trying to shortcut this and be able to use all of that material and repackage it in a way that then they can commercialise it and not pass on even an acknowledgement in many cases to the source of that material. And I think that's where fundamentally there should be an uphill battle. The problem is, of course, that calling the government into this, the Australian government's already under huge pressure in the relationship with the US. So it'll be interesting to see how that battles out.
What's also interesting now is we're seeing an arms race with AI companies doing more and more, and they're not just coming from the United States. We've got DeepSeek as well. So while the focus obviously is on OpenAI and all of the others that are coming through, this will be a widespread issue that I would imagine will be pretty hard to police. How widespread is scraping of news content by AI bots from what we know?
Well, we've seen a small win for authors of books that have managed to get some compensation. But I think what really, traditionally the publishers were getting at least links and traffic to their site when they were used by, say, a Google. What we're seeing now is that a lot of this is not even having attribution as to where the original source is. And I think that's where it's fundamentally wrong. You know,
look, I agree with you, but there is that issue that they had this fight with Google, didn't they, where the idea of that if you type something into Google, Google would take something from your article and give the answer, and you don't get the click as a news organization. They had that, they had a 3-year contract, then Google didn't renew. So they've got issues with Google and also AI now.
Well, under the media bargaining code, there was actually a payment to do that. And that's the other thing that's lapsed, is that they're also not renewing the media bargaining code. So it was still a commercial arrangement. And look, it's not just the publishers. Any business, any knowledge-based business, whether it's accountants, lawyers, consultants, or whatever, who have traditionally used content marketing, it's called, where you produce a large amount of content, and Google, for instance, in search, allowed you or helped you promote that, they're now just taking your content and still commercializing it for their own purposes without any significant attribution to the source. And this is where I think there is a fundamental issue of ethics that needs to be addressed here.
Well, talk to us about what can be done. What are the solutions here? Obviously, the money needs to change hands somewhere. It's clearly not just an Australian problem. All news organisations around the world will be facing this. And as you say, it's not just news organisations. What can be done?
Well, we've seen how difficult it's been for the Australian government to address the issues of social media for under 16-year-olds, which comes in very soon. But it needs to ideally be a global resolution to actually stand by the Copyright Act, which was an international agreement last century, to actually hold that to be enforceable or to find a new negotiation to a new agreement. But at the moment, what we're seeing is a huge amount of pressure to largely disregard it, destroy the very meaning of and value of copyright for content creators, and just allow tech companies to use it for whatever they want. And I think that's really where this argument's going to come down. What is fair? I love the old Australian saying, does it pass the pub test? I would say for most people it wouldn't, even though the convenience of getting AI solutions is great. I think people will say that there should be some sort of compensation to the people creating the content that feeds this beast.
Yeah, I guess people will agree with that. The question is, will they pay themselves? That's always the tricky one indeed. Put your money where your mouth is, yeah. All right. Nine has unveiled a major shake-up to its advertising and content strategy at their Upfronts held in Sydney this week, announcing new shows. There's Olympic coverage, also a unified ad platform right across everything, while warning that Aussie brands are missing out on billions by neglecting premium video investment. Darren, your thoughts overall on the state of television and the direction that Nine's taking it?
Well, look, the first thing I'd say, Aaron, is that when you look at the upfront season this year, both 7 and 9 have gone towards the back end. They've allowed all of the tech platforms and the new media, I guess it's been around too long to be called new media, but it allowed them to go first. And they're very much...
I think you and I are new media. We're the only new things going on.
But, all of the online platforms have been focusing on sales and conversion, which is, of course, an important thing for advertisers. But Nine is playing to its strengths here and talking about building the relation, or leveraging the relationships Australians have with their best content. We're talking about The Block and Maths and even Lego Masters. These are shows that there is still an audience tuning in each week. And so they're building on that. They're throwing in sport, particularly the Winter Olympics, and they're playing to that strength. At the same time, as you say, they're also trying to unify and simplify the ability to do business. And I think this is one in response to the competition for advertising dollars that we see, but that's been happening for the last 10 years. What we're also seeing is an increased change in the way, from the time broadcast licenses were handing out, 7, 9 and 10 were really competitive with each other and wouldn't really collaborate. And we're now starting to see a much more, a move towards a greater collaboration of the broadcast media as a way of fighting off the existential threat, some would say, that these tech platforms are having.
Yeah, you put it beautifully. I mean, this is a situation where you've got the tech platforms now are running ads, right? Netflix and Amazon Prime, they're running ads, Disney's getting involved. And so really, if we're talking about ROI for people, there's going to be more and more focus on the Nine Now and the apps and things where they can get some of the same data to be equivalent, right? What's interesting with this one, you think back to when News Corp sold 20th Century Fox a few years back and said, our future is news and sport. And that's essentially what Channel 9 is doing here as well, isn't it? There's no drama being announced. There's no comedy being announced. This is news and sport and people getting married.
Well, yeah, let's call it reality. And one of the big things that Nine pushed was that they don't just reflect culture; they actually create it. And then you think about shows like Maths and The Block. Well, I guess a lot of those tap into some of the best and worst of Australian culture, but there's an audience there for it. So much so that even with Maths, they're looking at a dinner party edition to go on to Stan Sport, which is a paid platform.
Yeah, very much so. And obviously it's the paid platform, which is interesting to see how they work, because that's the differentiation between 9 and 7 here as well. 7 doesn't have that paid platform. What do you think we'll see from 7 coming up? Because they're not far away and we don't even know what's happening with their ownership structure at the moment.
Yeah, I think you'll see pretty much a business as usual. They're going to try and create a sense of stability. They'll play again to their strengths as Nine have, but I'm not really hearing or seeing any major innovations or major changes occurring. So it will be interesting.
You spoke about the networks joining forces, and there is a question, obviously, a fundamental philosophical question about how many TV licenses can be sustained by the ad industry in Australia. But putting that aside, do you think that 7, 9 and 10 will eventually join forces when it comes to ad sales?
I think it's almost inevitable. It'll just be by when, and so it will be great for media advertisers and for their agencies, in that they'll have one platform to go to and be able to buy what is still an important part of the Australian market and an important channel or media platform to be able to reach that audience.
Yeah, interesting times indeed, and I love the fact that we get to sit here and commentate on it weekly, my friend Darren Woolley. Appreciate your time as always. Thank you.
Thanks, Aaron.